Hello. So today I want to talk about something which I feel like I've touched on a little bit before, but maybe not dove super far into. I've talked about ancestry, karma, and trauma, but not so much the current present moment, the family dynamics between a nuclear unit, maybe how you're interacting with your family on the other side, the importance of the concepts and themes that you do share with your family, how this energy is being transmuted onto you, how it can be resolved, and how it doesn't get resolved, I guess you could say. And most interestingly and importantly, if you are supposed to have children, if you're supposed to keep your line going, how do you know? Starting from the top, we have to ask ourselves, what is the point of like a family unit? And just to be clear, I know and understand that not everybody has a nuclear family unit. Some people have very unconventional families. Some people don't even know or understand their biological families, which is kind of like an interesting situation. I do feel like there is intention with and through that. So it could be that you are carrying the energetic information from a biological family, because I do feel like that's true regardless, but perhaps there are lessons that need to be learned with a new or another family, and they're kind of like layered on top of each other. So on one hand, biologically, you are absolutely receiving energy from not just your parents, but your grandparents, maybe even your great grandparents. I find that like great grandparents is kind of where it stops in terms of like things which are super relevant, obviously can go back even farther in time. It's just unusual for me to observe that when I'm channeling. And on the other hand, you've got nurture, right? It's not just all about nature. So I do feel that whatever concepts and themes you are struggling with, it may be rejected concepts and themes or energy coming from your parents or again later down the line. If you're not one to believe that ancestry, karma, or trauma exists, or that there's a DNA or metaphysical component to these things, consider leaning into the nurture. Because if our parents, say for example, are struggling with particular trauma in general, there's just no way that that trauma in some way, shape, or form is not going to spill over onto their children, right? Because they are in this active state of repressing this trauma, trying to pretend that it doesn't exist, but it has to come out. Like if it still exists within the body in some way, shape, or form, it has to come out. Even if the parent themselves is doing their best not to impact their children with that trauma, then they may even fall into a place of scarcity where they are kind of like with so many boundaries with their children. They're so repressed themselves that maybe they're not even giving their children enough love, enough support, enough care. So it's, in my opinion, almost impossible for there not to be any sort of energetic passing on of old negative stagnant energy, trauma, negative experiences. And to be fair, we kind of see it all the time. Not only is there a biological component of mental health and physical issues, but there's also a noticeable problem where people in families, and you can even imagine your family, other people's families, etc., there's this observation that people really do struggle with different themes. People in families may struggle with interpersonal relationships. People in families may struggle with finances. They may struggle with nutrition and eating. Maybe it's life purpose, job and career, etc. I think something that's really important to note is that just because you are not executing the concept and theme in the way that your parents did, so like for example, if your parents were abusive people and they abused you, it's not necessarily that you will go on to abuse other people. It can happen, but you could also unintentionally abuse yourself. So the concept and theme is there. It's just that you may not execute it in the exact same way. And this is why it's really important to start journaling, to start writing down patterns and intellectualizing this information, because you become so much more self-aware and you don't allow this old negative stagnant energy trauma coming from, other people in your family. It's not even yours. It's your responsibility to deal with it if it's come on to you, but those experiences were not your responsibility. You want to make sure that you are working through that and it's not affecting you. And it's also not going to be affecting your children if you have children or are looking to have children. Action items here are really digging into the concepts and themes of your family. It's great to have an interest in your, ancestry DNA, what your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and what their line did in particular. Jot down different stories that you have about them. What were their strengths? What were their weaknesses? If there's a way for you to kind of distill their concepts and themes, whether that be through their successes or their struggles through life, you can start to observe patterns which tend to develop. Maybe these things stopped right before you incarnated into this existence, or maybe they're things that you are still struggling with yourself. It is sometimes hard to connect the dots because obviously, like, our great-grandparents' generation lived in a very different time. So things will not necessarily correlate physically, obviously, but I find that this is very informative, and a lot of times when I'm channeling for my clients, this is the advice that I feel compelled to give them. It's certainly not unusual that I discover that families have lived past lives together. There is really something to say about the power of a family unit because everyone has their own distinct energies, not just in this lifetime, but also from multiple lifetimes. Like, talk about the most layered, complex, energetic amalgamation you could possibly think of. And I do truly believe that there is intention and energy. I don't totally understand when people think that, incarnations are just totally happenstance, because energy has a place to go. It has a reason to go there. It has a want and a desire, even if it's not in the way that humans intellectualize it. If you're here for a reason, because everything that you do from your point on Earth is for a reason. Maybe you're just listening to your biology, maybe you're listening to your subconscious, but there's a reason for everything. There's also a reason for lack of. Speaking of concepts and themes, you really may strongly know and understand, particularly if you do past life regressions with yourself, maybe even with your family members, what you are successful in to this day. You've likely worked through in several lifetimes, those skills, those abilities. Alternatively, what you're struggling with, you may have not had so much experience in past lives, or there was just simply something to challenge you to get to a place where you were either in a low vibration or you just simply needed to find another way to work through this problem. So maybe you failed multiple times in other lives. I know that we don't really necessarily like to think about that, but if, again, we're able to intellectualize it, it can be really informative for us. Action items for this section, you can definitely do past life regressions for yourself with your family and set this as the intention more specifically. There's lots of guided meditations on YouTube for you to do this and understand this. Don't get frustrated if you can't do it right away. If you're new to meditation, it may be more particularly difficult. There are, of course, also past life regressionists who can share this information without you going into a trance, or just a deep meditation. I don't know why I said trance. I feel like that's a little bit of an aggressive word, but anyway. Something to note is that you just want to be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Past life regressions are not always fun and kind, and they're just not this flirty way of doing something because you're bored. They can be deeply emotional. They tend to be very healing, and it can be very difficult to access another part of yourself that you don't know, because it sort of puts a break in your ego a little bit, that you, even if you feel that you've had past lives, to be interrupted with the actual feeling that you know that you did, it can be a little bit terrifying. I do want to say that, along with the intention and incarnation of you coming here for whatever reason, maybe it was because you were asked to complete something in the family line. Maybe there was so much failure in your family line, you have come here to put a stop in it. And I honestly feel like that's genuinely the case for a lot of millennials and Gen Z, because you do see a lot of paradigm shifts and a lot of stopping of negative behavior. Now we're kind of in a time where, although there's a lot of challenge and suffering, it's not in the same sense that our ancestors have gone through. We're certainly at a rapid age of evolution and technology, so circumstances are different and there's more ability to thrive than there was before. I'm not saying it's easy, of course, but there's just very different circumstances. So you can very much be, in a state where you are stopping generational curses, or you could be in a state where you are perpetuating the success of your family. Doing something entirely new, I feel like, is also kind of a third-ish segment, but it's likely primarily coupled with breaking generational curses. So you're either kind of starting something new or you are perpetuating something. And it's super easy to figure out what this is. Like, are you very much like your family? Are you kind of continuing on with their work? Are you trying to make things better? Or are you like genuinely putting a halt to it, totally starting anew and starting your own life? And usually you fit into kind of like one of those two segments. There can definitely be crossover, but when you look from like an unbiased point of view, like what your true purpose is, it typically is one or the other. So action items for this section is to understand kind of like what camp you're in. This obviously like isn't like a mandatory activity, but I think it can be helpful. And the helpfulness is really just the support and validation that there's a reason why you are here. There's a reason why things may be particularly challenging for you. Like it's just validation from the other side that times can be tough, but you're here for a reason because you have the strength and ability to change things. Within your family unit, or whoever you perceive to be your family unit, it's likely that you will have your very own unique energy, your own set of challenges and abilities, and in some way, shape, or form, you do kind of have this cohesive unit. I'm not saying that there's not struggles. I'm not saying that there's not fights. I'll be totally honest, whoever has like the most unhealed energy, or if there is just like more unhealed energy throughout the unit, things are going to be really difficult. And, it's really easy to kind of like place blame on other people that they're sort of the problem. But since increasing your vibration tends to work by proxy, and you can kind of like increase the vibration of people that you're around, if other people who are super, super close to you are struggling, you may want to look in the mirror because you probably in some way, shape, or form are struggling as well. It could just be that you're in like a little bit of an avoidance or a rejection zone. But getting back to the point, your energy is unique, and this is important, and there's a reason for this. In your household or within your unit, basically, whoever you're strongly energetically tied to or whoever you're living with, you have a very, very important purpose. Even if that purpose is not illuminated, even if you don't feel totally comfortable or confident with what your skills and abilities are, or you feel like this is a mess, you aren't supposed to be here, you weren't supposed to be here, you have no idea why, you're stuck with these people and with these families, and it's so easy to get into this kind of like victim mentality. But I would really challenge you to see things from kind of like an ego-less perspective, an unbiased perspective. There's a reason why. I can look at any family and I know exactly the reason why, like these people are together. I understand their past lives. I understand what they're here to do. So, wrapping your mind around the fact that there is importance and intention can be really helpful. Action items here is really to kind of like lean into your strengths and abilities, because even if this is sometimes at contrast with your family, right? Like if you have more of a rebellious spirit, your spirit guides and your ancestry line is like, this family needs to be more rebellious. If they're going to survive the next few generations, we need to have, people who are being incarnated into this family line who are breaking the mold, right? So there is this purpose within the family line to evolve and adapt and, make their name known here, right? So I'm not saying that it's always going to be easy, but I'm saying that there is a purpose to it. And you can do better and you can do well if you can kind of like lean into this trust and this ability and just double down on it, to be honest with you. Consider also what you bring to your family. Like, how are you the different person? And hopefully you can see this like in a positive light. I know that there's like the concept of the black sheep, but I don't think that that's particularly unhelpful for a lot of different reasons. And it's kind of unhelpful metaphysically because the black sheep mentality is just a byproduct of what is intended to be a positive change. And it's just like not quite clicking right away or not quite working right away. So the real question that we probably all have here is, why do we keep incarnating? And I think there's a lot of pessimism here because obviously we do not live in a perfect world. And quite simply, the answer to this is that we're trying to change the world, right? Like, we're setting the intention to incarnate because I do feel that we come here through our own free will. We're trying to make things better. We're trying to work through these problems. We're trying to change things, but it's a home makeover show that tends to last like centuries, right? Like, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be struggles. And we can see this because of expansion and contraction. We need like duality of energy in order to keep us grounded, but also to keep us continuing to expand and move forward. And there just tends to be tension and fighting between these two groups of people. You can see it as divine masculine and divine feminine energies. You can really see it however you'd like, to be honest, but we're trying to make things better. And then also, piggybacking off of that, we're really trying to make ourselves better. So we are trying to incarnate into a time where it's very appropriate for us to be here. So if the collective and the earth has a timeline that is really valuable for us, so like say I really needed to be here when we kind of like discovered an integrated technology, I needed to be here right now, right? I didn't need to be here 30 years ago. So that is part of it as well. So it's learning lessons for you as well as learning lessons for the collective. And then to tie this into our entire concept, your ancestry line has a lot of things to work out as well. So you may have karma with people from your family from different past lives that needs to be worked through. There may be a higher level discussion within your family that goes back to what we just talked about, where, hey, this ancestry line has a lot of value here in this lifetime. We need to keep going. We need to bring in people, again, who are going to adapt, who are going to work through the generational traumas that we've perpetuated. We need to turn this ish around, essentially. So there are so many levels to your incarnation and your purpose for being here. And I don't know. I'm not honestly sure what the action items are for this. Maybe it's just awareness. But I'll do it officially. Action items for this section are: start intellectualizing this. Why do you feel like you're here? I would strongly set an intention, keep affirming every day that you're supposed to be here. And the intention specifically is why? What else can you learn about this? Like, how does this impact the way you move throughout the world? How does this correspond to your interests? You can do a much better job refining what needs to be and belong in your life. And this is integral for your success. If you're just surrounded by all of this chaos and clutter that is old and stagnant and not relevant to you anymore, you're not going to be doing well. You're not going to be at your, maximum height of success. So it's important. I do just want to kind of interrupt because I think a lot of people have the sense that they're kind of like alone here in this world, especially if you are doing something incredibly new and unique. You may not be attached to your family anymore, and it can be very isolating. And even if you are still attached to your family, if you're going through different issues and challenges, it can feel like you're all alone. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of like a byproduct of existing at this point in place in time, existing at the end of your ancestry line. Things are constantly, warping and changing. But I really cannot stress enough how many times I channel clients who have grandparents, great-grandparents coming through, and you'd genuinely be surprised at their guidance and advice, because one would think that perhaps they have more of a conservative perspective, but a lot of times I have these late ancestry members coming through who disagree with the parents of like a Gen Z or a millennial, which seems so odd, but if you think about it, they've gone to the other side, they have such an unbiased perspective of what this family needs. When you're here on earth, you're so in your own ego, you're so in your own biased perspective, like you can't think outside of it. So they see it for the truth that it really is. People who are going through issues, in the current moment, here in the physical world, they just see themselves, they see the problems, they don't see a way out. So it's so hard for them to see things in a bigger, brighter light. Action items here is to reach out to your family line. Even people who have had negative, maybe they weren't the best people here on earth, they've learned a lot on the other side. And if you don't know who to reach out to, or you don't know them, you can just ask people in the ancestry line who have your best interest at heart, and they will watch over you. They will help take care of you. They will intervene only if you want them to. You have to be so specific with asking for help. Otherwise, they will not intrude on your life, because that is really, not consenting to your boundaries and going against your free will. So lastly, are you supposed to have children? I have a very specific answer for this. If you feel you should have children, you should have children. And I think that a lot of people either are kind of like fearful for the future. How could I bring children into this world, into these circumstances? And honestly, I feel that I do think it's like a responsible take to be responsible for your own self and your own healing journey before you have children. Like that definitely feels like something, that you want to do. You don't want to project issues onto your children. However, I think that can be wrapped up, honestly, in a couple of years if you really set the intention. If you don't want to, then of course, that's a different story. But, the planet itself is going to save itself. And we are also kind of genetically and biologically coded to save ourselves, so we're not going anywhere anytime soon. So, I don't genuinely feel like there's this catastrophic worry. In fact, I do feel like bringing newer, fresher energies into the world will only benefit us and be helpful for us. Like, we don't want things to remain stagnant. We don't want people who are here to live for that long. We need bigger, better, brighter energies, people who have learned things on the other side. Like, that's what's really important. But if you feel that you should have children, unless it's literally like this weird ego, narcissism, self-fulfilling, which I don't think anyone who's watching this or listening to this feels, but probably not a good thing. But it's more, again, this holistic vision, this holistic view. Do you feel that your purpose is here to do this? Do you feel that this is the right thing to do for yourself, your family, the collective? All great questions to ask yourself that are more philosophical and metaphysical, which are not just physical, right? Obviously you can finance a child, you can home a child, there's physical space for a child, but consider also the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of it as well. And if you don't want to continue your family line, that is totally cool. I would say, of course, don't default to fear and giving up just because you had a negative experience. If you feel that you will have a negative experience for your children, fair enough, I believe you. But if you feel that you can do things a little bit better, you probably can. And I think everybody can, right? Because we've already gone through those learning experiences. And as long as we've resolved them and healed them, we will not push that on to our children. And a lot of that has to do with self-awareness. People who are very not self-aware, they are the biggest perpetuators of ancestry trauma and karma, right? And there's no need to feel shameful about it, because if you don't want your family line to continue, it's not necessarily demonizing your family in any way. It's simply point in place in time. Maybe after this, you and your children want to go to a different dimension, a different earth. I don't know. Maybe there's better learning lessons for you there. Who knows? So it could just be up to relevance and point in place in time. Action items here is simply setting the intention affirmation as to whether you should or should not have children, intellectualizing this from more of a metaphysical space, and just sitting with the question, maybe letting it run through your body. There's so many interesting things about family dynamics. With the people who are still here, don't give up. It's painful, it's challenging at times. Dive into it, understand it. Allow yourself to see things from a different perspective. It will only serve to help you in the end. Best of luck.